Greetings. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Today's topic focuses on, does Tesla end up giving the Kmart treatment to Freightliner, Daimler-Benz, their owner, and in particular Cummins engine? And what are the implications in terms of the valuations of all of the major trucking companies, both in the United States and globally? And I think you'd be surprised by the shakeup that's about to occur. That's quite unbelievable. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is the first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. We also have a Patreon link in case you're able to perhaps support the effort that we're making to provide quality information on Tesla trucks in particular and EVs in general. We did a show. Please also note that your likes impact us. We do have a couple of ads typically in. It'd be appreciated if you'd watch 10 seconds of it because it does support the channel. It's kind of interesting because we did a show, our last show, and the focus of the show was the fact that Tesla now has an Arkansas visit of its truck that included J.B. Hunt, one of the largest shipping companies by truck in the world and the United States. What's fascinating right now is the fact that we're in an interesting, kind of crazy situation. And sort of here's the precursor on why I chose Kmart. There's a company called Kmart. There's a company called Walmart. One of the reasons that Walmart became so much larger than Kmart is that Kmart had what are called blue light specials in a circular. So they had a newspaper that had specials in it, and you were able to use that paper to get specials for the week, and it was a great opportunity. When Walmart came along, Walmart did not have the blue light specials and the circular. Therefore, Walmart had the benefit of no circular and an ability to therefore do an interesting routine where they were able to have lower prices because they didn't have to produce these circulars that Kmart had developed over time. So what ended up happening is Kmart told its customers, we're stopping the circulars so we can give you lower prices just like Walmart has. And Kmart's customers were extremely angry, and to the point of Kmart being forced to now start doing circulars again when they were discontinuing it. And as a result, it was one of the elements that ended up driving Kmart almost out of business right now, but pretty much out of business. So how does this relate to what we're doing with trucks and Tesla, Cummins, and all these other issues? Well, what's a very interesting situation is Cummins' business model is that they sell truck engines to all the major manufacturers, and they're one of the key manufacturers of truck engines around the world. 20 billion a year in sales, and it's an awesome juggernaut. You know, the thing I find fascinating about this is that Cummins is in a very tight spot, which is if you're providing engines to all these manufacturers, all of a sudden Tesla comes along and pulls together a truck where they're doing end-to-end. They're not making tires, but they're making the external of the truck, they're making the battery, they're making the motors. 80% of that truck is made by Tesla. So it's an integrated solution that allows them a lot of control that a company like Cummins does not have in the case of their customers. So we now end up in this weird position of Cummins, because of Tesla's vertical integration to stay viable, may have to completely change its business model to vertically integrate to now be able to compete with Tesla as Tesla moves into trucks. The disaster is if you've had a relationship with 20 or 30 different manufacturers for the past 50 years, what happens when you decide to vertically integrate and now not only become a supplier to your customers, but also one of their cheap competitors? How is that going to work? The answer is, I don't know how it's going to work. And my sense from Cummins / Freightliner Peterbilt, all these other companies that work with Cummins, is none of them have the answer to this either. The only sort of comparable example I can think of is what we've seen with Microsoft, where they went from providing operating systems to all of these different manufacturing firms for computers, and then all of a sudden Microsoft changed its mind and just decided, hey, I think we'll just go ahead and produce our own computers and compete with our longtime main customers. And so clearly Microsoft has way more power to control customer behavior than Cummins has to control the behavior of the manufacturers that they interface with. But it creates a really interesting question about how the future is going to look. Now, I've sort of so the bottom line is that we're in an interesting situation because it's entirely possible that Tesla could put Cummins in very much the same position that Kmart ended up in. They can't change their business model because the business model they have is what their longtime customers, in the fact of large, there's a structure there that's been established for a long time. And how do you modify that structure when any modification would harm many of your largest longtime customers? So the only solution may be to do the Kmart routine, which is just die on a systematic basis as your business is taken away by the Walmarts of the world. So it's a very interesting unknown question there. And not only is the question unknown, but now we have also the problem of, how do you really do this vertical integration? Because, the ICE engine is 2,000 parts. We've already discussed in theory, if you have 3 battery packs and maybe 4 electric motors in the wheels of a truck, that's way less parts. Maybe it's 100 parts versus 2,000 parts in an ICE engine that Cummins is selling. But now you also have the other problem lurking of, like, how is this really going to work out? I have no idea. An answer to that could be what the Cummins CEO said, which is, hey, we don't have to worry about this because the transition into the electric world that Tesla is talking about isn't going to be happening. The question mark is Cummins looking at how to move into the electric world? The answer is yes. They've acquired a couple of firms that are active in the space. So because of a firm they acquired called EDI, Cummins is now probably one of the top 20 producers of electric buses in the world, and they can distribute sort of that solution from EDI through their distribution system and become a player in that part of the world. But buses are a little bit different in terms of revenue potential versus cars. So I don't have a great answer for this, and I feel like the answer that is coming up is kind of like the one between Microsoft and their customers, and kind of like the one between Walmart and Kmart, where Kmart has some smart people working for them. They probably hired McKinsey and Company to say, hey, what do we do? And the answers that came up was what we see, which is, we ain't got no answer. The answer we have is to just die, and go out of business, which is unfortunate. It's not funny, but especially for all those that that are employed by this large successful firm. I like to get into the investment realm, and there's a company called AOL, and AOL pulled off what I think is some brilliant investment banking, which I think Cummins seriously needs to consider, because as soon as it's announced that this Tesla factory is open and ready to produce, some smart analysts are going to figure out what the productive capacity of that place is. And then all the productive capacity as it increases is going to be taken away from all the other manufacturers. So the reason I bring up the whole question of AOL is AOL came up with a really smart move. What they did was, when their stock price was extremely high and competing firms had lower stock prices, like Time Warner, for example, they used that high valuation to go out and buy up a bunch of companies. And then as their people came to their senses and their stock price fell, they now had a lower stock price for their core business, but all the things they had bought with the stock prices were worth a lot of money. So the stock didn't go to zero because of all those assets that had now been purchased with that very high market cap. I bring up that discussion relative to the Cummins situation because what a lot of people don't think about is anytime you look at a stock price, it in essence is a measure of the future growth of that company. So what a lot of people are saying is Cummins is like $140 stock. So there's a multiple of their earnings, which is their supposed growth rate each year. If Cummins is suddenly faced with the electric threat that Tesla represents, and Tesla goes from producing, let's say 5,000, a month in year one, up to year four, they're producing, a quarter of a million, half a million trucks, consuming 25% of the global market that wipes out competitors in that space. Guess what? That's the growth rate for a lot of other companies that were supposed to be either maintaining or growing their business in that field, and that includes Freightliner and Tesla and VW and all the other, famous truck brands like Navistar that are out there. This also includes BYD. So what we're looking at here basically is the fact that um, Tesla has the potential to do what Walmart did to Kmart. And part of the challenge is that there may be a possibility where there's a legacy structure that pins everybody down to where they're at, so that the only choice they have is not to respond with authority to Tesla, but to simply wait for the business to be taken away and then market cap be taken away. So I don't think it'll happen because Cummins is an old line company run by a lot of smart folks, but they're attached to a fairly slow moving legacy. And so I just uh, I just think it's a fascinating situation because in theory you have all these really smart people on Wall Street and at places like Cummins and Daimler and or Daimler, etc., VW, but they're sort of hamstrung because the structure of the world they're in pins them in on what their options are, so they can't respond to Tesla, and then when they do respond, they end up screwed. Um, Thanks for the question of whether or not Tesla has enough battery capacity. Um, I don't know, you probably already know this based on other shows we've done. It was announced by Tesla that, currently they have about 20 gigawatt hours that they're producing. By this time next year, they'll be at 35. The question came up is, will they build a gigafactory of production in China? The answer that Tesla came up with initially is, yeah, we'll build a factory and let you copy everything we have and wipe us out. Instead, Tesla is building an assembly plant with perhaps a little bit of a battery production at the end, maybe where they put the battery packs together. But they've announced that they're going to go from the original 35, I think it's gigawatt hours of batteries that they were going to build, which will be ready by summer of next year. They're simply going to grow the main plant to 105 gigawatt hours of batteries per year. So the delay in truck at any mass production was really designed to get to that higher battery production and allow them to be able to sell a quarter, 300,000 Model 3s a year, and at the same time add trucks and then add other vehicles based on those batteries to the lineup. So immediately know there's not enough battery capacity, but heading forward we do. All of this conversation sort of surrounds the discussion of the Arkansas arrival of the semi-truck. There's a lot of, I was surprised. I met one of the heads of a 10,000 truck entity called Landstar, and we were talking about what the perception is of Tesla currently. And the answer that came up was there's a sense from the large trucking sort of operators as well as manufacturers that because there are only one or two Tesla trucks moving around the road currently, the whole concept is not viable. The reality is, number one, I think there's some secret sauce inside of the truck, hence there's no schematics being released on what's going on underneath the truck. You get a picture of the underside or the side or the front, but it's hard to tell how that technology looks and what's new that Tesla's come up with that allows that truck to be viable. Number two, in certain industries there can be something called cognitive dissonance. And what I mean by this is, hey, if a big company with a lot of money, uh, if a big company with a lot of money like Daimler or Cummins or VW or BYD can't do it, then how can a small company like Tesla do it? Well, the answer is not only can they do it, but they can do it with a huge, uh, you know, I don't know, they can do it with a huge. I'm going to say they can do it with flair. And what I mean by with flair is that there's a bunch of people saying this truck doesn't work, it can't be done, da da da. Tesla is now running trucks that run nationwide, and they already have an infrastructure that allows them to service and customers from the battery side in terms of charging, as well as the part side within their service facilities nationally and globally in many places. So, any rate, the whole situation is fascinating to me. The one big question mark that I wanted to bring up with this is, will Cummins be smart enough to use their market cap to acquire firms to allow them to vertically integrate from just engines into whole trucks? That way they can then respond to the Tesla threat, with the full truck rather than just one part of the truck, because Tesla, basically is hosing them down, hosing their business model down. And so do you wait, if the stock is worth 140, do you wait till it gets to 30? Now you're at 30, your stock is worth a lot less. You lost all this market cap, your flexibility is gone. Whereas if you did an AOL routine where it's like, hey, our stock is 140, why don't we go out and buy 3 former partners that represent an efficient vertical integration of our firm? Now, if we do lose this market cap, we at least have used that market cap to create a structure of a firm that can go toe-to-toe with a firm like Tesla as they figure out how to handle the whole battery realm, which may never occur, but it just seems like a shame to let the stock price fall as you become under attack and lose that growth potential that the stock implied, and just get hosed by this other firm. So, very interesting questions. We like to come up with brilliant answers to problems. In the case of Kmart, they had a brilliant answer to how to deal with Walmart, which is pretty much to die, and their customers had them pinned down. It's possible that Cummins customers are saying to them, hey, if you vertically integrate and start competing with us, we'll put you out of business. So, anyway, Jerry, it's funny you say that, because there's something called market cap, and all that market cap says is it's an implied what is your growth rate of your firm. So if you go from a 15 to 20% growth rate that with the rest of the market down to a growth rate of 0 or -0, guess what? You lose that market cap anyway. So the question is, do you use it, or do you lose it with no value added to your firm? And innovative, creative techniques like this tend to be associated with young, hungry firms, where large entities like Cummins are more concerned about steady dividends and, not rocking the boat. And that kind of structure tends to put them at risk to firms like Tesla. Think about an example that comes to mind: Microsoft versus IBM. IBM, very stayed and true company to its zone, is getting toasted by the Amazons and Microsofts and Googles of the world. So that's the challenge: is the marketplace keep changing, what the customers want keep changing, etc. And where your growth lies is where those customers are headed. And if you haven't decided to go with them, that's your choice. I'm still amazed, because I'd be willing to bet anything that within 4 years, Tesla's at 200,000 trucks a year, and I think that's low. I think within 4 years, they could be at 500,000 or 800,000 trucks a year, which would represent almost half the trucks sold. Will this be allowed to occur? Sort of not without a fight, but it's not clear that the large legacy entities are ready to come forward or are able to respond, because they just can't find the battery density and other elements needed to produce a 500-mile truck that makes them competitive with Tesla. So, interesting. Yeah, the thing about it is this: 40% of the cost of a vehicle, and therefore sort of the structure of the vehicle, is battery. Then you have how efficient the electric motors are. So that's over half the cost of the vehicle. Um, the trucks aren't going to be built anywhere near the Fremont plant, so it's irrelevant. Number one. Number two, I'm hoping they just build the trucks right next door to the Gigafactory. It makes it a very efficient working relationships. But I think it'll be more likely that they build it in a higher density area with more labor available. Uh, hmm. uh, Excellent question about how does 35 gigawatt hour power trucks, if you think about it, at the long range truck, they're putting three motors in that. So in essence, it's three Model 3s that are going by when you see that truck moving. Um, you know, be able to devote 35 gigawatt hours exclusively to trucks, I don't think that happens for 2.5 years. And what that translates into is approximately, call it 300,000 cars a year. So that's about 100,000 trucks. Not exact. And it's not exact because you can do two of those motors and run the shorter range 300-mile truck, and you need three of them to run the bigger truck. And some customers might say, hey, we'll take an engine and a half. So let's say the average is 300 miles per truck that's put on the road, and then rich people or rich companies spend big to go for the full deal. Um, yeah, I think 3 years from now, total will be in that realm. Um, so, yeah, you know, if Tesla does end up owning semis, which actually could occur, um, I think it'll be unfortunate because the number of firings of people is going to be mind-blowing. Um, I just think it's fascinating also that, you know, it's just amazing to see a small firm go after the big dogs and hurt them on such consistent basis with better technology, and those entities are unable to respond, you know, with authority. Um, the point at which I think this tide is going to turn dramatically is when, like, when you look at the Tesla, the truck is running at 0.38 drag coefficient. The average truck evidently is up in the 7s or 8s. And what I'm wondering about is, at which point do we finally see Daimler, which has the most money because they have the largest market share in trucks, decide, you know, we're going to change what we do. Yeah, by the way, Jerry, excellent point. Instead of buying Solar City, why don't you buy Panasonic, man? What a dumb purchase. Because if you had bought Panasonic, you know, you now have all the stuff they do, and you control your battery destiny without Panasonic now going to work with Toyota and others to help them figure out their battery problems and therefore become a Tesla competitor. So I think that's an excellent point. Should you be the CEO of Tesla? Because because that's a lot smarter move to buy Panasonic and have cash playing around in that rather than screwing around with Solar City where things are declining. So I'm intrigued because the battery wipeout plan is not kind of working out as planned. The final note I want to make on this is, think about this fact. The 18650 battery that is used by Tesla has been reverse engineered ad nauseum for the last 8 years. Despite that having been done, the battery densities that are the highest come from Panasonic, and they're improving those battery densities by 5% a year on both the 2170 and the pre-existing 18650. Now, what's amazing to me is, you know, it's just mind-blowing that that gap hasn't been closed even on the old batteries, which means that when you put a battery pack together, competing battery packs are running 20 to 25%, you know, more batteries required for the same amount of power, which means the range on these vehicles is at 50 to 70 miles lower than what Tesla's is, because they're carrying so much extra weight in the form of what they're doing. And it also requires, I want to say, more energy because you have more batteries. There's a whole bunch of mores required, resulting in a performance penalty in the 20-25% range across all competitors to Tesla. So very, very interesting situation. And let's not even talk about the fact that we did a calculation of the amount of productive capacity out there. And the fact is there's just not enough battery capacity to service the demand that's currently out there. So there are many entities that are trying to get up the production scale on Tesla, and they can't do it. Yeah, that can't figure out the battery sauce. I just want to admit that I had one of my dumbest battery experiences, and I will come clean on this one. I was on a flight between, let's call it California and Chicago, and I sat next to a lady who was, she was working as a translator for General Motors, because on the Volt, they were translating the technical manuals from Korean into English. And I asked her about it, and she was like, yeah, basically GM went around the world to figure out who was doing lithium-ion batteries best. They found it to be in Korea in terms of long-standing experience of Samsung, some of the other manufacturers. So GM decided to source batteries from there. And the net result was that they needed to translate those manuals so they could be able to work with the technical materials that were coming out of Korea on those batteries. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, that does make sense to go the best of breed to do this. And they did so, and they produced an okay vehicle, but there were some compromises made, like they're using large battery packs, which were cheaper versus small ones with a lot of aluminum in it. But it turns out those brick battery packs that they had don't dissipate heat very well. So therefore, they tend to have a short lifespan, and you can't supercharge them because of inability to manage the heat element. So, very interesting situation. I have to admit that I sort of gone over my time for today. Greatly appreciate all of you taking time out to join us. My reminder today is, and I'm about to just do it myself, is 20 leg lifts on both legs. Try to put a 5-pound weight on it on a daily basis. It helps strengthen your quads so that you don't need a knee replacement. Try the 5-2 or the paleo diet. You can read about them. The 5-2 requires just a little bit of fasting because it sort of stimulates your metabolism so you digest better. But you have to cut back on food for a couple of days a week, a couple of days on either end of 5, if you will. Suggested. Seems like a good idea to me. At least a 30 SPF on sun. Some sit-ups in chair wouldn't be a bad idea. I love everybody suggesting go to plant-based, get rid of animal. I've moved to chicken and fish, headed towards way more fruits and vegetables. I appreciate all of you recommending that. It is a great way to go, but do love getting a taste of that every once in a while. I hope we sort of clarified our battery cap discussion that we've discussed. Wanted to thank all of you for taking time out once again. Look forward to all your questions and contributions to our channel. Please remember to like. Any comments appreciated. Hit us up on Patreon. If you could help out with a little funding, would be greatly appreciated. In German, we say Tschüss, mach's gut. In French, au revoir. Hebrew, lahithroot. Farsi, Khoda Hafez. Farvel. And finally, interesting. Interesting comment there, Thaddeus. Wow. And in Jamaica, we say, "Nuff respect, wa good man." And thank you for joining us, and look forward to any and all comments and suggestions on how we can execute better.